Here's the question. Who are we under attack by? Who are we under attack by? Really?
Well, that's a very good question, Ryan. Good morning, and welcome to another episode of Old Men in Chairs. Today we're going to do something a little different. This is not going to be a music reaction, but it is going to be a reaction to a musician. That's Ryan Upchurch on your screen there. Ryan is a very talented rapper and country music star, but he also likes to go on rants, and he had a doozy of a rant the other day entitled, "Is 2024 the turning point of the century?" I think it's going to be. He has some very interesting things to say. Apparently, in reaction to his watching the viral Katt Williams interview that occurred about a week ago, and which has already had over 36 million views last time I checked. Mr. Williams is a comedian who had a lot to say about the entertainment business in general, and Hollywood in particular. Ryan starts from there and then goes on. Now, it's a 10-minute rant, so in editing I will probably cut some of Ryan's words out just to keep the overall length of the video down. But of course, I will have links to the original as well as some of the other things that I'm going to be showing along with this.
Today we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about a few things, but let's start with this. All right. Who's seen the Katt Williams thing? Man, when I seen that, I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, tell him, Jack. Oh, he finally had enough, huh? Well, I'll tell you this. A lot of people are saying, oh, well, he's on crack, or he did meth, or man, he's having a meltdown. I seen a guy telling the fucking truth. It was written all over his face. It was written all over the other guy's face. When you got somebody in a corner and you're saying shit that is so real that nobody in the studio has a reply, it was that true.
For those of you who have not seen the interview, and I will have a link to the full interview, I created a short excerpt, 30 seconds, of what I distilled down as the basics of Mr. Williams' argument. So let me play a little bit of that for you. This is Katt Williams on the Club Shay Shay video channel.
Like, it's important in the checks and balances of the universe that liars not get to make complete narratives for themselves.
Are you not afraid about being blackballed again? These are some power people.
What do you mean again? These people are not powerful. Satan can't create anything. That includes blessings for his people. That's why, you know what the number one job of somebody that sold their soul in Hollywood is?
What?
Is to act like it didn't happen. They pay you to not talk about things they don't want you to talk about.
Now, I believe that last statement is absolutely true. They pay people not to talk about the things that they don't want talked about. And that's just not the entertainment industry. That was proved to be the case with the news industry during COVID. All the big networks, including Fox, were given vast amounts of money to promote and told that they could not say a discouraging word. In other words, they gave up their role as a watchdog to give us the truth about the possible dangers of the in order to keep the money flowing from the great federal spigot. That was also proven to be the case all across the economy. Money was doled out to medical organizations, to hospitals, to doctors, to professional sports teams to get on board. It was the largest PR campaign in the history of our country, and it was all funded courtesy of the U.S. taxpayer, or more accurately, the Federal Reserve that printed up all the money to do it. Yes, that's what's been happening here, at least for the last 4 years and probably a lot longer.
It was that true. And, you know, I was sitting here thinking, and I was like, damn, man, that's a lot of fucked up shit. And it relates to every part of entertainment. Radio, television, politics, music industry, everything. Here's the question. Who are we under attack by? Who are we under attack by? Really?
Well, that's a very good question, Ryan, and I can perhaps provide you a clue because this is a subject that has been discussed in other forums, most particularly by Dr. Robert Malone, who did a whole program on what we call fifth generational warfare or psychological warfare being used against the citizens of our country. You know, psychological warfare has a long history. In fact, you could go all the way back to the Sun Tzu's classic of military strategy, The Art of War, written 2,500 years ago in China, in which he told generals that the best victory is the one where you don't have to fight at all. And you do that by undermining your enemy psychologically, making them think you are big when you are weak. Now, in the modern era, that's been used a great deal, especially World War II, to deceive the Germans as to what our intentions might be, also in various conflicts ever since. But slowly, and more rapidly in recent times, it's been turned against the American people. So in other words, they developed these tremendous strategies of how to move people's minds, and then they turn them on their own citizens. That's what you're seeing. Everything that you see reported is basically propaganda that's being used to try to influence people. A great deal of social media is used for that purpose as well. Now, the trick of fifth generation warfare, and let me put a slide up on the screen here briefly. So, fifth generation warfare is a war of information and perception. It targets your existing biases and creates new cognitive biases. It focuses on the individual, and it is difficult or impossible to attribute as to where it's coming from. And the very nature of the attack is concealed. So that's why you can't really answer that question, Ryan, because the people behind this psychological warfare are hidden from sight. We can guess who might be behind it, but it's hard to find the proof.
Because let me tell you something. This ain't no physical war. This is psychological war. On the fucking mind. That's the only way to infiltrate America. Is through radio signals, television. You can't just come over here demanding stuff. We ain't that country. We're the country that's been buying guns for hundreds of years. There's still guns somewhere probably fucking buried from 70, 80, 100 years ago. In perfect condition. The inside of our country is the most powerful. So they gotta make us think we're the most weak. And there's obviously something going on with the psyche of Americans. Look around. And some might say, no, there is physical damage being done here. The only physical damage I see going on is people doing physical damage to themselves because their brain is fucking damaged already.
That's the point. That's exactly out of Sun Tzu. The weapons will do you no good in this type of war. It's not a physical war. It's a war for the mind. They're having a great success of dividing Americans one against each other and breaking down our culture.
And the people who have damaged brains and have no common sense, well, they hang out with other people who have damaged brains and no common sense. What does that breed? Fucking stupid is what it breeds. And for all them people, there's somebody on TV, somebody on the radio, a Facebook page that roots for your fucking stupidity. And guess what? That person ain't stupid! No.
Exactly. The people behind it are not stupid by any degree. They've figured out how to push all your buttons, especially on social media. Social media provides all the information that anyone would ever want about you so that they can get inside your brain, figure out what your cognitive biases might be, and push your buttons. As Dr. Malone has said, the only way to win in this psychological war is not to play. And that means don't give them all that information on social media about yourself and what you believe, because they're just going to turn it against you. I know that's a very difficult concept to understand, but it's something at least worth thinking about. They don't need to know what they're protesting. They just have to be manipulated emotionally to believe that they're the right cause. Now, but they can manipulate these people through social media and organize these things through social media. Now, who is they? That's the question he's asking. Well, the simple answer would be the deep state. The deep state represents the ongoing bureaucratic power of the government that survives any change in elected leadership. They control pretty much because in a lot of cases they have blackmail against the elected leadership through operations like Jeffrey Epstein, where they get people in compromising positions and then they can just say, well, you're either going to play ball with us or you're not going to have a career in politics any longer because we can expose you. And that can be pretty persuasive. So there's a lot of that going on. It started way back with J. Edgar Hoover and all his files that he had on every politician. And it's just gotten more and more sophisticated with honey traps and operations like Mr. Epstein was running. So the deep state in general, by which we mean the CIA, the FBI, Departments of Defense, Homeland Security, they don't worry so much about who's going to be elected president because they can control that. In fact, they in many cases may pick the candidates that they feel are safe. Now, Mr. Trump kind of upset the apple cart because he was not supposed to win. Now you can see that they're lining up every possible weapon to make sure that doesn't happen again, because he may be the only person that is not controlled by the deep state and is trying to tear the deep state down. A more interesting question is, who is behind the deep state? And there, I think you've got to be looking at the money. You got to follow the money. So much of what happens in the political world is involving money. Money for kickbacks for politicians, that's a small part of it. But money for big industries like the defense industry, the weapons manufacturers, the pharmaceutical industry, that's big money. And when you trace it all back, it turns out that most of the large corporations in the world are controlled by just a small number of people. Big investment management funds that hold, large positions, majority positions in some cases, in the stock, all these other large corporations. And if you trace that back, you probably find large banks, the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers, behind all those large investment organizations. So really, what you've got is the whole world economy and the whole world political system being controlled by a few people in the entire world who have a design to get more and more power and more money and control people. And of course, they realize that the number one obstacle to their plans for world domination is the United States of America. Because the United States has a tradition of freedom and individualism that is a direct threat. And that's why so many people resisted COVID pandemic and the push, because they just could recognize that it was more about a power push than it was about health. And I think they were surprised by the number of people that rose up. I will put in the notes a link to a very interesting interview that was recently given by Dr. Bret Weinstein with Tucker Carlson.
But I suspect that some powerful set of forces has decided that consent of the governed is too dangerous to tolerate, and that it has begun to unhook it. And we do not know how this works. We can see some of the partners who are involved in this, but I don't think we know ultimately who's driving it or where they're going. I think many of the notions that we picked up about nations and who our friends are and who our enemies are they are now more misleading than they are informative. And I wonder if the rent-seeking elites that have hoarded so much power are not unhooking our rights because effectively they're afraid of some global French Revolution moment as people realize that they've been betrayed and left without good options. Is that what we're seeing? Certainly feels like we're facing an end game where important properties that would once have been preserved by all parties because they might need them one day are now being dispensed with, and we're watching our governmental structures and every one of our institutions captured, hollowed out, turned into a paradoxical inversion of what it was designed to do. That's not an accident. Humanity is depending on everybody who has a position from which to see what is taking place, to grapple with what it might mean, to describe it so that the public understands where their interests are. It is depending on us to do what needs to be done if we're to have a chance of delivering a planet to our children and our grandchildren that is worthy of them, if we're going to deliver a system that allows them to live meaningful, healthy lives, we have to speak up. And I don't know how to get people to do that. I'm very hesitant to urge others to put themselves or their families in danger, and I know that everybody's circumstances are different. Some people are struggling just simply to feed a family and keep a roof over their heads. Those people obviously have a great deal less liberty with respect to standing up and saying what needs to be said. But it's what we call in game theory a collective action problem. If everybody responds to their personal well-being, if everybody says that's too dangerous to stand up, I'm not suicidal, I can't do it, then not enough people stand up to change the course of history. Whereas if people somehow put aside the obvious danger to their ability to earn and maybe to their lives of saying what needs to be said, then we greatly outnumber those we are pitted against. They are ferociously powerful, but I would also point out this interesting error. So I call the force that we're up against Goliath, just so I remember what the battle is. Goliath made a terrible mistake, and it made it most egregiously during COVID, which is it took all of the competent people, took all of the courageous people, and it shoved them out of the institutions where they were hanging on. And it created, in so doing, the dream team. Created every player you could possibly want on your team to fight some historic battle against a terrible evil. All of those people are now at least somewhat awake. They've now been picked on by the same enemy. And yeah, all right, we're outgunned. It has a tremendous amount of power, but we've got all of the people who know how to think. So I hate to say it, or maybe I like to say it, but I don't think it's a slam dunk, but I like our odds.
Now the stakes are much higher because if they want to roll out the next pandemic, which might in fact be the fake crisis of climate change, they know that there's a formidable army of dissenters out there. And Ryan has now joined them, who will not go quietly into the night. And therefore, they're upping the ante. That's why you'll see Twitter is under attack, advertiser boycotts. Substack as well is under attack for claims that they're allowing Nazis and white supremacists to publish on their platform. Of course, that's just a smokescreen. There may be a small number of white supremacists who use that service. But the answer to bad speech is not censorship. The answer to bad speech is free speech, where people can be exposed for their bad views and countered with their bad argument. What they're really trying to do is shut down the legitimate dissent because it's counter to the narrative that they're pushing. In that regard, I'm sure many people will notice that Ryan has a Confederate flag as well as the United States flag behind him. Well, he's from Tennessee. He's from the South. And he views the Confederate flag as more of a social statement of solidarity with the South, not any racial bias, which others have tried to read into it. I've done reactions to a number of his songs, and I can tell you that he is in no way a racist person. He frequently works with black artists, and his main producer, Kalani on the Beat, is a black fella from Houston. So I don't believe he's got any kind of racist bone in his body. But some people will be triggered by that, no doubt.
Well, in the cowboy days, if you got into it with somebody and they beat your ass, well, you just got your ass beat. You couldn't sue them because of trauma. You couldn't. It wasn't a thing. You just got your ass beat. Nowadays, there's less consequence for fuckery and lying. They actually want you to lie. They want you to do fuckery. Lying and fuckery is everything that I just talked about that we've seen in the past few years. I think everybody's sick of the lying and the fuckery.
I agree. A lot of people are sick of the lying and the fuckery. A growing number of people are sick of it because that's all that's out there. As he said, turn on your television. I don't watch it at all. But if I did, it's nonstop lies and fucking around with you. I think that's a good place to end it. As you can see, we only got it about 4 minutes in of a 13-minute rant. So tune in and see the rest of it. I think it's a very significant development that a person with Ryan's following, which is huge, has come out with such a strong statement, questioning where we're going as a country. And I hope that reflects a huge amount of his followers and a huge amount of our country that is starting to question where we're being led and how we're being confused by psychological warfare.